been talking about all kinds of cool things. Man, you think we'll be able to pick up after this interruption?
I know where you left off.
Okay.
It's fine. We're totally kidding, Lydia.
Guys, have you ever felt that way lately? Like life has just been one huge interruption. Like everything was going along so well, and all of a sudden this virus came in and everything was interrupted. Well, here's the deal. I don't think that God wants us to see this time as an interruption. In fact, I think He wants us to see it as a disruption. In fact, I believe that God is in the business of disruption. I know it's happened in my life over and over again. He takes what I find is normal and He disrupts it. He puts a disruption in there to cause me to move in a different direction, to cause me to do maybe something I wouldn't do if I was doing the same old, right? He wants to use us in this time in extraordinary ways, in ways that He couldn't if we wouldn't be open to the idea that He disrupts lives.
Check out this video. He's got some good stuff to share on this subject.
The coronavirus lockdown of 2020, while scary, tragic, frustrating, might also be a gift for your generation. Stay tuned. So a few weeks ago, in a message to his church, Reverend Brendan Williams was asking this question, right? When all of this is over, he asked this: will we fall back into old habits, old assumptions, and old patterns of corrosive behavior? Or will we finally do something fundamentally different to reshape our world for the betterment of all? The question he's asking is, will we allow this season to simply be an interruption, or will we choose to see it as a disruption? Now, let's talk about the difference between interruptions and disruptions, right? An interruption is a pause or break in the process that once the pause or break is over, then things get back on track. Things go back to normal. Whereas a disruption is a pause or break in the process where once we get past the pause or break, things don't go back to normal. No, instead we go in a new direction, right? Disruption always brings with it a change in direction. I think about when I was a junior in high school and I was diagnosed with mono and pneumonia at the same time, right? This was awful. I ended up being in the ICU for a week. I was out of school for a month. Like, it was crazy. I couldn't see my friends. I couldn't see my girlfriend who I was dating at the time, so she ended up dumping me, right? Like, it was ridiculous to just be locked in my home with nothing to do for a month. And it's crazy because that's what many of us are living in right now, right? We're in this season of life that really feels like an interruption. It feels like everything we had going for us has been taken, and now we're just waiting for things to go back to normal. It's an interruption, right? We had things going in a great direction, and then all of a sudden, there was a pause or break in the process. And we're just hoping that someday things will go back to normal. Now, the problem with interruptions is that they often lead to frustration, whereas disruptions often lead to innovation. And my hope is that this season we're in right now, that you will choose to see it as a disruption instead of just an interruption, right? Because the coronavirus lockdown of 2020, right? This is the greatest disruption that your generation has ever experienced. And it breaks my heart knowing that there are so many of us who are just choosing to see it as an interruption, right? It's a frustrating waste of time instead of seeing it as a disruption, a gift that will help us move in a new direction. One of my favorite examples of this is Blockbuster and Netflix, right? Blockbuster saw streaming movies online as an interruption. They thought it was just a fad that eventually would go away and then things would go back to normal. Whereas Netflix saw it as a disruption. Netflix saw it as an opportunity to step into a new way of doing business. And today, right, if you go trying to find a Blockbuster, you won't because they went out of business. Whereas Netflix is killing the game, right? Everybody has it, everybody knows about it. We even use Netflix as a slang term for other things that we're not gonna talk about right now because that's not the point of this video. But here's what it is that in life, we can choose to see things as interruptions or disruptions. Interruptions often lead to frustration, whereas disruptions often lead to innovation. Another way to say it is this: who do you want to be? Do you want to be Blockbuster or do you want to be Netflix? And it all depends on your perspective. Now, something we've got to know as Christians is that God is in the business of disruption. and disruption can change your life. When we look in the Bible, we can see story after story of God showing up and disrupting people's lives, right? He's inviting them out of what was and into what might be. A great example of this is with Abraham, who in Genesis chapter 12, we hear God saying this to Abraham. He says, leave your native country, your relatives and your father's family, and go to the land that I will show you. Literally, what God is saying is, I need you to leave your home and your family and go somewhere new. That is a disruption. He goes on to say that I will make you into a great nation. I will bless you and make you famous, and you will be a blessing to others. I will bless those who bless you and curse those who treat you with contempt. All the families on earth will be blessed through you. Abraham's whole life was being disrupted in this moment. You see, God was taking him out of what was and inviting him to step into what might be. He was inviting him to change direction. And what God did is he took Abraham, who at this point was nobody from nowhere, and he told him, hey, Abraham, I'm going to use you to bless everyone everywhere. God was inviting him into a new disruption. Disruption can change your life. In Exodus chapter 3, we see God speaking to Moses and inviting him into something new. Here's what he says. God says, look, the cry of the people of Israel has reached me, and I have seen how harshly the Egyptians abused them. Now go, for I am sending you to Pharaoh. You must lead my people Israel out of Egypt. You see, in this moment, all of the people of Israel were being invited to move in a new direction. God was calling them out of their home in Egypt and into the future, the promised land, which could probably be really scary in that moment. And that's oftentimes how disruption can feel, right? It takes us out of what was, but it's inviting us into what might be. It's inviting us into a better tomorrow. Another great example is when Jesus called the disciples. In Mark chapter 1, we read this. It says, one day as Jesus was walking along the shore of the Sea of Galilee, he saw Simon and his brother Andrew throwing a net into the water, for they fished for a living. And then Jesus, he calls out to them. He says, come, follow me, and I will show you how to fish for people. And they left their nets at once and followed him. I think this is such a beautiful picture of how Jesus invites us into his movement, right? Because when Jesus invites us to follow him, it's not just like a 2-week vacation, right? It's an entirely new way of being human. It's an entirely new way of living. After the disciples had spent their 3 years with Jesus, they didn't go back to the way things were. It wasn't just an interruption, it was a disruption. Their lives were never the same after that moment, because what Jesus was calling them to was to let go of what was and step into what might be. If following Jesus hasn't totally disrupted your life, then are you really following Jesus? Because disruption always brings with it a change in direction, and disruption can change your life.
So what do you think? Are you ready for some disruption in your life?
Are you willing to say, I'm not going to stick with the same old when this coronavirus ends? I'm ready for something new. You know, if you're willing to say that, I'm going to let God disrupt my life, man, he's going to show up and he's going to do something amazing through you. God will use this time if you let him. Will you let him?
We have some questions that we think you all will enjoy discussing with your leaders online or in your small group. They're questions to God from you, from us. You ready? Here they are.
Okay, so this is me speaking to God. God, what are you trying to teach me right now? What are you trying to teach me through this disruption?
God, what do you want to change in me?
And finally, God, how do you want my life to be different because of this? Not the same old. When this ends, how am I going to let this disruption make me different? How do you want my life to be different? Know this, when you ask God a question, he will give you the answer. So pay attention. As you ask these questions to God and you respond to him, chatting back and forth over these next few weeks, pay attention to the way God uses this disruption to move you in a different direction. We love you guys.
We love you. We
Can't wait to see you next week.
Hugs.